In an age long past, where empires rose and fell like tides, destiny was forged in the crucible of ambition. From the dust of forgotten lands emerged a saga of power, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. This is the story of a realm on the brink and the extraordinary figures who dared to shape its fate. Our tale begins not with a crown, but with a spirit burning bright amidst adversity and humble beginnings. Driven by an unyielding vision, they navigated treacherous currents, facing challenges with unwavering resolve. Through cunning alliances and strategic brilliance, they began to carve their path, gaining influence. Each victory, a stepping stone. Each challenge, a testament to their growing strength and leadership. From humble origins, the seeds of an empire were sown, destined to flourish under their command. With power consolidated, the empire's borders began to stretch, vast and imposing, across the land. Under their reign, cities flourished, and new wonders were brought forth, marking a golden age. Yet expansion brought new faces, some loyal, others harboring their own ambitions for power. Among them, a formidable figure emerged, a force to be reckoned with, known as the Challenger. This golden age, marked by grand architecture and vibrant culture, was also a time of subtle shifts. The foundations of greatness were laid, but not without the seeds of future strife taking root. But even the mightiest empires are not immune to the creeping shadows of dissent and betrayal. Whispers of betrayal began to echo through the opulent halls of power, unsettling the court. External threats loomed, testing the very fabric of the empire's strength and resilience. The challengers' loyalty, once unwavering, now seemed to waver, their ambition growing bolder. Political intrigue became a deadly dance, where trust was a dangerous and often fatal luxury. Personal sacrifices were demanded, weighing heavily on the ruler's soul, a burden of leadership. The once unified realm now faced internal strife and external pressures, pushing it to the brink. The stage was set for a confrontation that would redefine their destiny and the fate of the empire. The inevitable clash arrived, a storm breaking over the empire, unleashing chaos and destruction. A decisive battle raged, its outcome hanging precariously in the balance, lives on the line. Political upheaval shook the very foundations of the throne, threatening to crumble all they built. For the ruler, it was a moment of profound personal tragedy, a test of their spirit and will. The challenger, now a direct adversary, played their final hand, a gamble for ultimate power. Amidst the chaos, destinies were sealed and legacies forever etched in the annals of time. The climax unfolded, raw and unforgiving, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. In the aftermath, the dust settled, revealing the ultimate fate of the characters and the empire. Their story became a testament to the enduring human spirit, ambition, and the cost of power. The echoes of their reign resonate through history, a powerful reminder of destiny's intricate dance.
Ah, Cleopatra and Mark Antony. You know the names, right? Theirs is probably the most famous romance in history. Shakespeare wrote a whole play about their passion and their tragedy. But what if that story we all think we know wasn't just a love story? What if it was actually a massive, high-stakes political gamble to control, well, the entire known world? So, was it this legendary romance, or was it a cold, calculated move for world domination? That's the big question. And, as we're about to see, the truth is probably somewhere in that fascinating, messy middle. All right, let's set the stage. We're going to start at the very beginning. A meeting of two absolutely giant ambitions. Okay, picture this. The year is 44 BCE. Julius Caesar has just been assassinated. Rome is, to put it mildly, in total chaos. The Republic is literally tearing itself apart at the seams, and that leaves this huge power vacuum just waiting for someone to fill it. And it's onto this incredibly volatile stage that our two main characters are about to walk. So, who are we dealing with here? Well, first, we've got Cleopatra. Not just any queen, but a brilliant strategist, the ruler of Egypt, and crucially, the mother of Julius Caesar's only son. And on the other side, Mark Antony. He's Rome's top general, a charismatic politician, and a key member of the triumvirate. That's the three-man crew trying to hold the crumbling republic together. I mean, these two were just dripping with power and ambition before they even laid eyes on each other. So what happens when these two forces of nature finally meet? Well, it's explosive. It sparks this alliance that's both deeply personal and intensely political. And they had this shared goal. They were going to build a whole new kind of empire. And look, this wasn't just some short-term fling. They had 3 kids together. And that move right there tells you everything about their long-term vision. These children weren't just, a family. No, they were the literal foundation of a new Eastern dynasty, one that was clearly being set up to one day go toe-to-toe with Rome. And this whole plan really came to a head at this big event called the Donations of Alexandria. Think of it as their public declaration of a new world order. I mean, just look at what they did. Antony gets up there and names Cleopatra Queen of Kings. He then declares her son Caesarion the true heir to Caesar. Wow, that's a direct slap in the face to Caesar's adopted son Octavian back in Rome. And then, for the grand finale, he starts gifting huge chunks of territory, kingdoms like Armenia and Media, to the kids he had with Cleopatra. Back in Rome, this wasn't just seen as scandalous. This was straight up treason. So how did Rome react? Oh, exactly how you'd think, with absolute fury. But it wasn't just anger, it was fear. They looked at Mark Antony, their greatest general, and saw him completely abandoning his Roman identity. He wasn't one of them anymore. The narrative was that he'd gone native, that he'd become the consort, the plaything of this Egyptian queen. Yeah, this was never gonna last, right? A collision was inevitable. You had Antony's new Eastern Empire on one side, and Octavian's traditional Roman power on the other. And make no mistake, this wasn't just going to be another Roman civil war. This was shaping up to be a war for the future of civilization itself. Now, Octavian, Antony's rival, was an absolute political genius, and he wielded propaganda like a weapon. He didn't attack Antony as a Roman rival. That would be messy. Instead, he painted this picture of Antony as a man who'd been bewitched, a puppet whose strings were being pulled by this seductive foreign sorceress. It was an incredibly effective smear campaign, and it completely turned public opinion against Antony. And things escalated fast. First, Antony divorces Octavian's own sister, a massive public insult. Then, Octavian somehow gets his hands on Antony's will and reads it aloud in the Senate. And it confirms all their worst fears. Antony wants to be buried in Alexandria, not Rome. But here's the masterstroke. Octavian convinces the Senate to declare war, but not on Antony. They declare war directly on Cleopatra. Just like that, it's not a messy Roman civil war anymore. It's a noble defense of Rome against a foreign threat. Absolutely brilliant. The whole thing came to a head at sea, at the massive naval battle of Actium in 31 BCE. And for Antony and Cleopatra, it was a complete disaster. Their huge fleet was just outmaneuvered and systematically destroyed by Octavian's brilliant admiral Agrippa. In a single battle, their entire dream of an Eastern empire was just gone, shattered. And that crushing military defeat, well, it led to that tragic, famous ending we all know. And from the ashes of their ambition and their love, a brand new Roman Empire was about to rise. So Octavian's army is now at the gates of Alexandria. The final act of this tragedy is about to begin. A rumor starts to spread, and it reaches Antony. A false report. Cleopatra, it says, is dead. And he's completely devastated, believing his queen, his partner, his entire world is lost. Antony takes his own life. He falls on his sword. And really, it's that moment that has forever cemented their story as one of history's great romances, the man who simply could not live without his queen. After Antony's death, Cleopatra knew her fate. Rather than be captured and paraded through the streets of Rome in chains, she famously took her own life, supposedly by the bite of an asp. With her death, thousands of years of Egyptian pharaohs came to an end. Just like that, Egypt became another Roman province. So, Octavian returns to Rome as the undisputed master of the world. A couple years later, a very grateful Senate gives him a new title, Augustus. And with that, he becomes Rome's first emperor. The Roman Republic was officially dead. So, that brings us all the way back to that first question we asked. Antony and Cleopatra. They lost everything. Their lives, their kingdoms, their dream. But here's the thought I want to leave you with. By trying to build their own empire, did they accidentally force their rival, Octavian, to build an even greater one on the ruins of the old republic? Is it possible that their epic failure, in some strange twist of fate, is the very thing that gave birth to the Roman Empire? It's a pretty fascinating legacy to think about, isn't it? You know, there are some stories from history that are just so huge, so epic, they feel more like a myth. We're talking about a romance that didn't just break hearts, it broke empires. A story that literally redrew the map of the ancient world. Of course, I'm talking about the one, the only, Antony and Cleopatra. Okay, so right off the bat, let's get to the big question. The one that historians and poets have been arguing about for literally centuries. Was this really the greatest love story of all time? Or was it something else entirely? A story of pure, unrestrained passion? Or was it actually a cold, calculated political alliance between two of the most ambitious people to ever walk the earth? That's what we're going to dig into. All right. To even begin to answer that question, we first have to get a feel for the world they were living in. And let me tell you, it was a world in total and utter chaos. So, everything kicks off with the assassination of Julius Caesar. Boom! Instantly, there's this massive power vacuum in Rome, and the Republic just starts tearing itself apart. So what happens? Well, three powerful guys, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus, they step in and basically carve up the entire Roman world between them. And our guy Mark Antony, he gets what was considered the jackpot, the incredibly wealthy eastern provinces. Now let's talk about Cleopatra, and I mean really talk about her. The first thing you need to do is forget everything you've seen in the movies. This woman was no mere seductress. She was an absolute political powerhouse. We're talking about the last pharaoh from a dynasty that had ruled for 300 years. She was a brilliant linguist, fiercely intelligent, and she had one single all-consuming goal: to keep Egypt independent and restore its former glory. She was a force of nature. And on the other side of this equation, you've got Mark Antony. After Caesar's death, he was the man, Rome's most famous and powerful general. His soldiers absolutely loved him, and he was a genius on the battlefield. But, and this is a big but, he was also famous for his larger-than-life personality. He loved a good party, he loved luxury, and he could be incredibly impulsive. Now, as the new ruler of the East, his main job was pretty straightforward. Make sure all that incredible wealth and grain from the region kept flowing back to Rome. So you've got this brilliant, ambitious queen in Egypt, and this powerful, impulsive general in charge of the East. And that sets the stage for the moment that changed absolutely everything. Their legendary first meeting. So here's the setup. Antony summons Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus. And this was not a friendly invitation, This was a power move. He basically wanted to put her in her place, find out where her loyalties were, and, let's be honest, figure out how he could tap into Egypt's legendary wealth. But Cleopatra, she was not about to play the part of some subordinate little queen. No way. She saw his power play and decided to raise the stakes. I mean, just listen to how the historian Plutarch described her arrival. She didn't just walk in. She came sailing up the river in this incredible barge that looked like something out of a dream. It was pure theater. She was dressing up as the goddess Venus, coming to meet Antony, who liked to compare himself to the god Bacchus. It was unbelievably audacious and absolutely brilliant. She wasn't just showing up for a meeting. She was making a statement. She was saying, I am not your subject. I am your equal. And you know what? It worked. Big time. Antony was completely blown away. I mean, totally captivated. He just followed her back to her home base in Alexandria, and what started as a political negotiation quickly became the most famous and powerful partnership in the ancient world. And this little detail just gives you a sense of the kind of life they led. They started this exclusive club for themselves and their inner circle called the Imitable Livers. And yeah, it was all about these incredible, over-the-top feasts and parties every single night. But here's the thing, don't let all that fun fool you. This wasn't just about having a good time. It was a projection of absolute power, wealth, and confidence to the rest of the world. And this right here, this is the absolute key to understanding them. Their relationship, their love, it was completely tangled up with their political ambitions. You just can't separate the two. Their big plan? To create a massive new empire in the East, a sort of Greco-Roman superpower, with Alexandria, not Rome, as its glorious capital. They were building a direct rival to Rome. Meanwhile, all the way back in Rome, Antony's rival, the young, cold, and incredibly calculating Octavian, is watching every single move. And he doesn't see a powerful new alliance. Oh no, he sees betrayal. He sees weakness. And he uses it as the perfect excuse to launch one of the most brilliant and destructive propaganda campaigns in history. So this is where it gets really interesting, right? You've got these two totally different stories. Octavian's version, the propaganda, was that Antony was this weak, foolish Roman who'd been completely enslaved by some foreign sorceress. The reality, of course, was that this was a powerful, strategic alliance. But Octavian's story was simple, it was sexy, it was scary, and it played right into all of Rome's deepest fears about powerful women and decadent Eastern influence. And it worked. Roman public opinion turned hard against Antony. Well, it wasn't long before this war of words turned into a real war, a civil war for control of the entire world. Which leads to the big question. How on earth did this power couple, with all the wealth of the East at their fingertips, lose everything? Well, it happened in a few key steps, each one a bigger and bigger provocation. First, you have the donations of Alexandria. This was a huge public ceremony where Antony basically carved up huge chunks of the East and just gave them to Cleopatra and their kids. And to really twist the knife, he declared Cleopatra's son Caesarion to be the true son and heir of Julius Caesar. Now that was a direct shot at Octavian, who is Caesar's adopted son. Then, to top it all off, he publicly divorces Octavian's sister. That was it, the final insult. War was on, and it all came to a head at the massive, decisive naval battle of Actium. And Actium was an absolute, unmitigated disaster for them. Their combined fleet was completely shattered. Their dream of a new Eastern Empire just sank to the bottom of the sea right there off the coast of Greece. There was nothing left to do but run. They fled back to Egypt, knowing full well that Octavian and his legions were right behind them. And that brings us to the final act of this tragedy, their final days, trapped in Alexandria as the walls of the city and their entire world started closing in around them. So Octavian's army is right outside the gates. The end is clearly just moments away. And in all the chaos and panic, a false report gets to Antony. A rumor that Cleopatra is already dead. Absolutely heartbroken and believing that everything was lost, he committed suicide by falling on his sword. Just a classic, tragic miscommunication. Now, Cleopatra herself was actually captured alive, but she knew exactly what Octavian had planned for her, the ultimate humiliation, to be dragged through the streets of Rome in golden chains as the star prize in his victory parade, his triumph. And she was just not going to let that happen. She would not be a trophy. So whether it was a poisonous snake smuggled in a basket of figs, as the legend goes, or some other poison, she took her own life. She died on her own terms, not as a prisoner, but as the last queen of Egypt. Which brings us all the way back to our original question, doesn't it? For centuries, their story has been told as a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when passion gets in the way of politics. But is that really what it was? Or is it the story of two incredibly ambitious leaders who made a bold, audacious gamble to forge a new kind of empire and just happened to lose to the unstoppable machine that was Rome? That's the question that makes their story so timeless and ensures that we'll be talking about them for another 2,000 years.
All right, today we're tackling one of history's great stories. A story of love and power so big, so intense, it nearly redrew the map of the ancient world. But it all came crashing down in suicide and conquest. Yep, we're talking about Antony and Cleopatra. So, here's the big question, right? It's a story we all kind of know, or think we do. You have these two absolute powerhouses. The world's most powerful couple. They had the armies, the money, the brains. So how on earth did they lose everything? Okay, so to really get this, we've got to set the scene. And the scene is, it's total chaos. We're talking about Rome after Julius Caesar's assassination. There's this massive power vacuum, and the whole republic is just ripping itself to shreds in one civil war after another. And right into the middle of all this mess step our two main players. So on one hand, you've got Mark Antony. This guy is Rome's top general, a superstar, basically Caesar's political heir. He has legions at his command. Then you have Cleopatra. Not just a pretty face, she was a brilliant, ambitious strategist, the queen of Egypt who commanded incredible wealth and spoke like a dozen languages. Seriously, these two were forces of nature all on their own.
So you can probably see where this is going, right? When two forces like that exist in the same world, they're bound to collide. And when they finally met, wow. It wasn't just about starting a legendary love affair. It was about creating an alliance that was going to shake the Roman world to its core.
And what's so wild is how fast their relationship went from political to personal and then back to world-shakingly political. It starts in 41 BCE. Antony summons Cleopatra basically to check her loyalty, but he's so completely captivated that he just follows her home to Egypt for the winter. Then you fast forward a few years to 34 BCE, and things get really serious. At this big public ceremony, the donations of Alexandria, Antony stands up and declares Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, to be Caesar's actual heir, and he gives him Roman land. For Antony's main rival, Octavian, who was Caesar's adopted son, this was way beyond an insult. This was an act of war, treason. This really shows their connection was so much deeper than just a political power play. The famous historian Plutarch even wrote about it. He said it wasn't just that she was beautiful, it was that being in her presence, just talking to her, was, and I quote, irresistible. It tells you everything, doesn't it? This was a meeting of two brilliant minds, not just a romance. But look, you just can't build an alliance that powerful, one that openly spits in the face of the guy who wants to rule Rome and not expect a fight. It was never going to happen. All their power, all their defiance, it was pushing the Roman world towards a showdown, a single winner-take-all battle that would decide everything. And when I say showdown, I mean it. The sheer scale of this thing is just mind-blowing. At the big one, the Battle of Actium, you had more than 800 warships in the water. Think about that. This wasn't just a battle, it was a clash of titans for control of the entire known world.
And on paper, you'd bet on Antony and Cleopatra all day long. They had bigger ships, more troops, all the money in the world. They should have won. They should have been unstoppable. But they weren't. The Battle of Actium was an absolute, unmitigated disaster for them. Octavian's ships were smaller, faster, and they just ran circles around their huge, clumsy galleys. Then, to make things worse, one of their top commanders literally switched sides in the middle of the fight. It was a total catastrophe. Their whole plan, their whole empire, gone. And just like that, the dream was over. That vision of a grand Eastern empire with Alexandria at its heart shattered. All they could do was retreat, humiliated, back to Egypt with whatever ships they had left. But Octavian wasn't going to let them go. Oh no, he was right behind them, and the walls were closing in fast. And their fall from the top was just shockingly fast. First, that devastating defeat at sea. In just one afternoon, their naval power was completely crippled. And then, what always happens? Their allies and even their own legions saw the writing on the wall and started abandoning them. Until finally, there was nowhere left to run. They were totally alone, trapped inside Alexandria, with an enemy army at the gates. It was over. And this is where we get to the final, tragic chapter. They're cornered. All hope is gone. And they're left with a terrible choice. Let themselves be captured and humiliated, or take matters into their own hands. And the way it ends is just pure tragedy, driven by a terrible lie. Antony gets word, false word, that Cleopatra has already killed herself, and he just breaks. Believing she's gone, he sees only one honorable way out for a Roman general. He falls on his sword. But here's the most awful part. He doesn't die right away. And in this final, gut-wrenching scene, they bring the dying Antony to Cleopatra's hiding place, and he literally dies in her arms. Now, with Antony dead, Cleopatra knew exactly what was next. She knew Octavian would drag her back to Rome, not as a queen, but as a trophy. He'd parade her through the streets in chains to prove his victory. And she, the last pharaoh of Egypt, was just not going to let that happen. No way. Choosing her own death wasn't an act of surrender. It was her very last act of power, of defiance. Which leaves us, all these centuries later, still asking, what is their legacy? Was this an epic love story that almost toppled an empire? Or was it really just a story of fatal ambition, a gamble that went horribly wrong and destroyed them both? You know, the truth is, it was probably both. And maybe that's what makes their story so tragic and so timeless.